Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome to the show, Jesus.
Thank you.
So you just got 30 days, huh?
Yeah. Well, it'll be 30 days on the 18th, so I'm getting pretty close, but I'm feeling good.
Now, why is this different than before? Why do you think it's different from before now?
So at this point, my last withdrawal was particularly bad, and um, it kind of got to a point where um, I was doing really bad, but I didn't really want to go to the hospital. But I knew I was done, so I kind of just tried to um, kind of do it on my own. But I wasn't really eating. I didn't have any meds, and then it kind of culminated in me having a heart attack um, in late October. I believe it was the 23rd. So, uh, I had to spend a couple days there, and during that time, I had some people come visit me and kind of made the realization that it really wasn't worth it anymore to keep doing this.
Yeah,
So
you're too young for a heart. How old are you, man?
27.
Yeah, you're a little young for a heart attack.
Yeah. So got myself moved into a sober house. Been here about 2 weeks now. It's been going really well, and I'm fortunate enough that I'm not really struggling with cravings anymore. I think I got the wake up call that I kind of needed.
Because your drug of choice was alcohol, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
So when did you start drinking?
Um, 2014, I believe. So, I mean, I'd experimented with alcohol when I was, um, age 15, I believe, and all throughout high school. I was about that party life. I was drinking, doing drugs, whatever. But 2014 was really when it hit me really hard.
So you were like 17 then?
Um, 19. I was 19 years old.
Okay. So what made it so where you went from like just a partier to an everydayer?
Well, I was a single dad at that time, and then I met a girl um, who at the time was like, I'll take care of you guys. You don't have to do this alone. So I ended up getting an apartment with her, um, and we were still partying at the time. A lot of the baby was spending a lot of time with the grandmother at the time, so we were still partying. But the relationship was really abusive. Um, at the end of the day, I think it culminated when eventually she stabbed me in the leg. I actually have a huge scar across my thigh um, from a fight we had where I was stabbed. And then after that, obviously she went to jail. I kicked her out, and I just started. It kind of stuck up on me. I never intended to become someone with AUD, but as the days went by, I just kept drinking more and more and more, and then it kind of just never stopped.
So that was when you were 19 that you're a new dad. How old were you when you got her pregnant? 18, 19?
I was that was a large part of it as well, because the woman, I try to keep this as short as possible, but you can kind of infer that the woman that I had the child with was 36. So gather what you will from that. So you know that played a huge part into that as well. So that person having to go to prison, and then me um, having to take care of the baby on my own,
Yeah.
contribute to that as well. So
Now, are you an only child, or do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have 10 siblings.
You have 10, like not even like half, but like full-on siblings?
Yeah, so well, half and full. Basically, my parents got divorced when I was 12 or so. My mom went on to have four more kids. My dad went on to have three, so 10 in total. Um, and yeah, I mean,
That's a lot.
and they all lived together, so it was like me and my stepmom and my mom, and then all the kids all in one house. So that was pretty wild.
Yeah, and what's the age difference?
So I'm the oldest, and I do believe the youngest is about 7 years old.
So you have a kid older than your sibling.
Um, no, actually. So I believe they're like 13, 14, actually, now that you say
Oh,
that. No, I don't.
Still, that's quite the age gap. Still 14 years. That's no joke.
Yeah.
Um, so that's when you started drinking heavier, was when you were 19, 20?
Yes, absolutely. That's when I would say that I was drinking regularly. Where my drinking really got out of control, I think, in my opinion, was 2019. Was when it got really, really, really bad. Um, I have a history of being in abusive relationships basically throughout my entire life, and 2019 is when I kind of broke. That's when I kind of recognized that alcohol was making me feel better. And to give you an example of that, before then, I would go through withdrawals, but I could still go a couple of days without drinking. I didn't even know what withdrawals were back then.
Yeah.
But 2019 is when it really hit me that, like, oh God, I'm really deep into this. And at that point, I mean, for the Americans watching, everybody knows what a handle is, right? I was basically going through one of those every 24 hours at that point.
Of what?
Vodka, Skull 100. So it was really bad.
Yeah.
That was at the time, I think I got hospitalized the first time as well
For alcohol poisoning?
withdrawals. Yeah.
Yeah, because I see. So you didn't have a consequence from drinking too much. The only consequence is you didn't have enough to get you drunk, and now your body is shutting down.
Right. Pretty much. Yeah.
And so, how were you during COVID then? If like 2019, were you just drinking hard during COVID, or did you like take a step back?
So I was drinking really hard up until I got married. So I got married in around December of 2019. It was right before COVID hit. And during COVID, I went off the rails completely. So I got hospitalized the first time, I think right before I got married. And once COVID hit, yeah, that was when I kind of always stayed home anyways, but um, being stuck, I had this really small apartment. It was only 700 square feet. I had 2 kids at the time, I believe 3 kids at the time, and stuck, at home with 3 kids and my wife, and it was just nuts. And I really did start going off the rails really, really hard then as well. I would say that
It's understandable that you would.
yeah,
I mean, people were. That's why I asked how the drinking, if it took even more of a flight into 2020, because now you're just like stuck all together.
yeah, and I live in Colorado, so the governor here was one of the governors, or this is one of the states where the liquor stores were kept open so that the hospitals would have beds, so when everything was closed except for the liquor store or the 7-Eleven, that's pretty much all I did. That would be my chance to leave the house for the day and come back home and just get fucked up and,
Do it all over again.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
How many times do you think you've been hospitalized because of drinking?
Man, I would say about 12 at this point.
And you're only 27.
Yes, that's correct.
So 12 in the last like 5 years?
I would say in the last 5 years. Yeah. I didn't really start getting hospitalized up until about right before COVID, was the first hospitalization. And then after that, kindling kind of took over and it just kept getting worse and worse. And up until this year, like I said, October 23rd, I'll remember that day forever. So,
And you remember that because of your heart attack?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And did that kind of not straighten you out, but give you kind of a new lease on life?
I believe so. I mean, I think one of the most memorable things is like someone, the doctor coming in and she was very kind to me, and she kind of looked at my records and how many times I've been hospitalized, and I have some mental health issues, so she knew that as well. And one of the biggest things was like nobody came to visit me, so I was like, whatever, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and she was like, you got to do this for you, man, because the next time you're not going to make it. I know you feel lonely. I know you're scared. I know you feel like nothing's, going your way, but it's still going to be worth it. And, that kind of sounds cliche, but for some reason I took that to heart. And I was like, you know what? You might be right. So
I used to hate cliches, but at the end of the day, cliches are cliches because they happen so often that they become a cliche. There's nothing that happened once or twice that's a cliche. If someone says to me, "Oh, that's a cliche," I'm like, "It's a good thing that it's a cliche. That means it was effective," you know?
But it's actually it kind of hit me. I'm like, if I'm 27 years old, I have a ton of kids, by the way. I have 5 of them now. But if I'm 27 years old and I'm already in this deep, I mean, imagine if I keep going.
You already have 5. Are you going for 10 or 11 to break?
No, I had 3 to begin with, and then I've got one. One of them is my wife's that I'm in the process of adopting, or was in the process of adopting. That's been put on pause, but and then I've got 2 with her as well. So
She's senior drinking at its worst?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so she's in favor of you doing a sober living?
Yeah, so that's kind of another thing that hit me as well. Is I got drunk one night. I think this was approximately a week before the heart incident, where I got really drunk, and we've been having a lot of marital problems throughout that year, or this year, and at that point I just kind of exploded, and I was completely wasted. I don't remember, but I just completely exploded, and at that point she was like, until you get better, I'm out of here, and took her stuff, took the kids, and moved out. So
that didn't cause you to drink spiral more?
No, that's when that actually was when I, kind of came to the realization too. It's become a series of, realizations and a series of epiphanies of like, this is getting to be too much. But that's when I initially, after I walked through the house and saw the stuff was gone, that's when I, basically quit cold turkey at that point, which turned out to be a terrible idea. So.
Now, we met in the Hams group, and I would see you, struggling, and I knew I wanted to hear more about like what caused you to continue drinking, but like it seems like you had it and then you didn't, and then you had it and then you didn't. Did you feel that way of that exhaustion of stopping and starting and stopping and starting?
Yeah, the kindling was getting pretty bad. So that's kind of, I'm one of those people that I guess, the kindling really affected me quite a bit. And every single time it would be, it used to be 1 or 2 days I would withdraw really bad, but I could do it a week of just, and it would get to a point where I couldn't keep up with myself, because I remember one of the worst withdrawals that I went through. I was in a full-blown withdrawal, and I still blew like a 267 at the hospital, but in full-blown withdrawals.
Yeah.
Getting Ativan at that high of a, having to be on oxygen to make sure I don't, go into respiratory failure from the Ativan that they're giving me, because I'm withdrawing that hard.
The Ativan was not touching you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I kind of got tired of it, and it stopped being something that I did to feel good. It became something I did so that I wouldn't be sick. Eventually. So I wasn't able to enjoy it at all anymore. I'd have my moments where I would get drunk and I'd be like, yeah, I feel great. But, it kind of turned into, oh, I have a shooter in my pocket just in case, I go into withdrawals while we're at Walmart or something, I couldn't be sober.
Airplane bottles?
Huh?
The little airplane bottles?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
And carry them around just in case.
Yeah. Yeah.
You never know when you get let out in, in the snow and you're going to need an airplane bottle to kind of keep you straight again.
Yeah. So it just became a chore at that point, and I could see that people were getting tired of it. I was getting tired of it. It just became a hassle.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting being alone is exhausting because now you got to listen to yourself.
Right.
And there's nobody more negative against themselves. You know what I mean? You can say whatever you want about me. I've said it way worse to myself.
Exactly. Yep.
Why do you think it's going to work this time?
Well, I think the biggest help right now is that, so like I said, I got into a sober living program. That's been really helpful.
First time?
Yeah, it's my first time. Yep. And, Vivitrol, just keeping up with Vivitrol shots, it seems to be really effective for me. So I've been definitely keeping up on that. And I just, like I said, aside from, having a heart attack, the absolute amount of, coming to the realization of the absolute amount of damage that I'm actually doing to my body, all of that coming together has been really helpful when I do get cravings, to remind myself, do you really want to go through this again? And just trying to remember everything that I've put myself through, my family through, remembering the times in the hospital, and it's an efficient enough motivator for now. Now, do I have times where I'm afraid that I may fall back into it? Of course, but just trying to keep it in my mind, that the next time might be the last time,
Yeah, if you're having a heart attack at 27 because of, coming down from drinking, what's going to happen next time? And who's to say you're even going to make it? You could be alone and have a heart attack and never make it to the hospital to be saved to begin with.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And, and that was another thing too, because it's funny you mentioned that, because I had started, the symptoms had started earlier that day. I was at Walgreens and I just had not been feeling good all night before that, sweating buckets, chest pain, but I have anxiety. So I was like, okay, I might just be anxious, but it didn't feel right. One of the main symptoms, or one of the most frequently reported symptoms of heart attacks, is kind of like a feeling that something's not right, or an impending doom feeling. So I walked in, asked the pharmacist for some aspirin, and called 911. The guy gave me a bunch of aspirin, probably saved my life, because when the paramedics got there, they did an EKG and they were like, my heart rate was ridiculously high. My blood pressure was up, but I told them, I recently stopped drinking. I'm probably just anxious. They didn't see nothing on the EKG. Then about 4 hours later, like I said, I just had that feeling. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to drive myself to the hospital. I get to the hospital. They do an EKG initially that looks fine. They do a troponin test, which is a measure of heart enzymes that may be damaged. That looks normal. I was quite literally about to get discharged. The nurse steps out and she's like, I'm going to go get your discharge paperwork. And I don't know if by the grace of whatever creator we may have, the doctor orders an EKG right before I leave, which is not typically something that they do. And that's when they caught it, right as I was going to walk out the door. And they were like, you're not going home. You need to stay. So that was, that kind of brings me back to the next time might be the last, So, I mean, if it took them right up until right before then to catch it,
yeah. And you could have just, if you were home and by yourself, you might not even think twice about it. Right. But it sounds like, do you go to the same hospital for detoxing? This podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. If you are looking for therapy and not able to get something right away locally, you can do that with them. Within 48 hours, you can find a therapist to get on telehealth with you. I mean, I haven't heard anything but great things from people that have already done it, that watch my show or listen to my show. If you're looking to get 10% off your first month, you can go to betterhelp.com/MJ's PNP MCA. That is betterhelp.com/MJsPNPMC.
Yes. Yep.
So do they know you there?
Yeah. Well, this particular team that worked that worked with me or on me, I guess last time, they didn't know me, but obviously I have a pretty extensive medical record with them, so they could see everything.
So they knew that you were suffering from AUD when it happened, or did they even blame out? Okay.
They did, and that was actually one of their, obviously they did their frontline treatments. I got, I can't remember the name, some anticoagulants that they shot into my stomach, and then blasted me with Valium and propanolol, and just basically trying to get my heart rate down. But I got lucky; I didn't need a stent or anything, so like I said, I got lucky. So.
Yeah, that's almost more than luck too. I mean, just the fact that they went through your shit and knew that what you would need. You know what I mean? Like, some might say, "Oh, he's just an alcoholic," and just go be like, "All right, release him." And sometimes that happens where it gets waved off. Oh, they're just drinking too much, or they're just using too much, and they can only save their own life by. You got lucky that the team actually paid attention and wanted to make sure that you were okay before they let you go.
Yeah. I think I had been sober for 4 days at that point too. So that I think that was a huge part of it too, because I didn't show up drunk. They did run, their drug tests on me, and I don't do drugs. They ran a blood alcohol test. I was at 0.000. So, I mean, at that point, I think that's when the doctor was like, wait a minute, he's not just drunk. There's something going on. Let me do this test one more time.
Yeah. When did you get the first injection of naltrexone?
I had initially tried naltrexone. I think it was either July or August. And then I had
the pill one.
Huh?
The pill one.
It was an injection, Vivitrol.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and I want to say September. I got another one, but in September, that shot wore off after about 2 weeks. I don't know if the pharmacist made a mistake on the dosage, or I'm not sure what really happened, but that wore off in about 2 weeks, and that was succeeded with quite intense cravings, which is really weird. I don't know why that happened, but towards the end of September, going into October, right before that incident, was when I really I'd just gone off the deep end at that point.
Because you were off the shot. The shot wasn't working anymore. Could you still drink on the shot?
I could. I just didn't want to as much. But the times that I did drink on the shot, it was effective in reducing the
craving
I would get. But I would just pound more. To be honest, I would just keep going until I got where I wanted to be. But again, that being said, by the time I was where I needed to be because of the effects of Vivitrol, I was gone. Like, I was so far gone at that point. It's kind of one of those things where you don't realize how intoxicated you are until some bad stuff happens, and then you're like, wow, I'm really drunk, so.
Yeah, and luckily for you that, you're back on the shot again.
Yes.
Because it does help with cravings, and I know that it does take it a lot more to get drunk, and I think you're at the point now where you're kind of looking back like, all right, I can't do this moderation thing because I don't know how to moderate.
Correct.
Like, kind of abstinence kind of should be the key for you for a little while.
Absolutely. And, I was discussing this with a peer of mine as well, where, I was like, he was saying the same thing. He was like, I just want to be able to moderate. And I'm like, you can't. You just can't, because it's wishful thinking, and the intentions are there, but it's always gonna, for me at least, it always just doesn't work.
Yeah, for me too, bud. Like, I tried, I got sober the first time 5.5 years ago, and I did the inpatient rehab, I did the sober living, I did the whole 9. And I went to this rehab in Los Angeles specifically because it uses cannabis to help you get off opiates. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And it was the first time in 10 years that I would say I would get off opiates out loud to myself. So I went to this rehab and it worked for me. And then 13 months into being sober and clean and sober, whatever you want to call it, but I was both, from pills and from alcohol. I was abstaining. And then on 13 months, I drank again. And then I went 9 months of like trying to moderate my drinking and like only drink on certain occasions, never drink and I gave myself the rules. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to drink and drive. You're not going to do this and then you're not going to get hangovers. And then I woke up with a hangover on Leap Day 2020. And I said to my wife, like, either we have to drink now or we have to quit drinking, but something needs to happen. And she was like, well, I'll quit. And I thought, okay, what's a better sober date than Leap Day? You know what I mean? Like, I'll have my first anniversary technically in 2024 because I was so hungover from drinking a bottle of Jack that I'm like, I got to either drink again right now, it's Saturday afternoon, or I got to never drink again.
Right.
And luckily, my wife chose that we won't never drink again. And it sucked because then 2 weeks later, COVID shut down everything. And that's when we're like, all right, well, we're going to have to really do this now if we said we're going to do it because it's only been 2 weeks. And that was how my sobriety started off for the second time. I always tell people I've been in recovery for 5.5 years, but my sober date is different from my recovery date.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think for me too, I that's been one of my biggest fears as well, is like going a pretty significant amount of time without drinking and then kind of getting back into it. But and this goes back to why moderation doesn't work. I think the way kindling works and how far into it, and I apologize, me adjust this, but the way kindling works and how I recognize my drinking patterns, moderation will never be possible because once I start withdrawing, I'll just start withdrawing at higher and higher, blood alcohol levels. And then at some point I won't be able to keep up. So, even trying to moderate wouldn't even work for me because I'll just start withdrawing so much quicker.
Yeah, it'll go from 0 to 100.
Right. Exactly.
What do they call that? Precipitated withdrawals, I think.
Yes. Yep.
And for people that don't know, precipitated withdrawals means that the withdrawals, which were already severe, are even worse way sooner than they should be.
Right.
So I'm glad that you're able to sit down now and talk and be more open. You're feeling a little bit better.
Yeah.
You got your hair cut. You're looking good. You're feeling good. You're definitely coming up on 30 days. And that's awesome, man. And by the time this is released, you will have 30 days.
Right.
So that's even cooler. And like I said, I've seen you I've been in that group. How long have you been in that group?
I think I've been there since about I think I've been there since about 2019 because that's when I really started to take my sobriety when I started to struggle, I would say. That's when I kind of the first time that I was like, okay, I've got to stop. This is going too far. And here we are 4 years later and obviously you've seen my posts and what a journey I've been on. So
that's why I knew I wanted to talk to you, is because I've been in that group for about 2 years. I had Ken on my podcast a while ago. Early on, I had him on and we talked for 2 hours about his harm reduction. And I think for people like him that can drink once a week, that's awesome. I can't do it.
Yeah, I was funnily enough thinking about that today when he's like, I can do planned detoxes, and I'm like, man, I wish, but
the plan is thrown out the window, bro.
Right, you've got to have an iron will to do that. I definitely can. So
yeah, and I think that he can, and all power to you, man.
Right.
And it's working for you. And if it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, if it's working for you, it's working for you. He has all the rules in place. And I can respect that. It's just not something that I could ever do.
Right.
I'm glad you're at the point now where you're like, nope, I got to be abstinent. And I hope it's mending your relationship too, because that can't be easy on her to take care of the kids while you're going off the rails.
Yeah, and I think spending this much time sober has kind of opened my eyes as well to not just, being sober, but kind of turning my life around entirely. I want to go back to school. I want to try to get a new job. I want to save up and maybe start, try to buy a house, just try to, I lost so much time to alcohol. I realized that, I'm 27 years old. And now's the perfect time. Now's the perfect time to try to catch up. So,
and you'd be ahead of me because I didn't find it until I was 33.
Right. And I'm not really one of those people who are super big on, oh, I didn't get, buy a house when I was 25, of course, but still, I still have time to get things done. I missed, like I said, I lost so much time to just alcohol and being so hard on myself that now is the time to get these things done. And I think a large part of it too has been a mental health struggle because, you asked me on a previous question, why do you think this time is going to be different? I'm finally on a medication that's actually working. We've been through about 7 or 8 different kinds of medication at this point that haven't worked for me. And, I've replaced that with alcohol, but now, we've got me on the right stuff. I'm feeling good. And that's helped a huge amount as well.
And that's what people don't realize is it's trial and error with mental health medications.
Right.
What works for you is not going to maybe work for me or work for the next person that has any mental health issues. Everybody has a different imbalance in their brain that these chemicals are trying to work for. And like I was engaged with somebody who was bipolar schizophrenic, and I saw her do the ring of let's try if these meds work. And then, all right, well, here's 7 weeks you have to come down off these meds, and then we'll try if these meds new work. Nope.
Right.
After 6 months of that, 7 more weeks of, all right, we got to wean you down. Let's try with it was just, and they never figured out the right medicine. She committed suicide. And it's because they never figured out the right meds and what was the right fit. It's just trying to find the next, it wasn't going to work. And that was almost 8 years ago. And people weren't talking about mental health like they do today.
Right.
Like, I wish she could have been around to see how much it is on the forefront now. And people are discussing mental health more. They're making it less stigmatized. And they're making it more normalized because there are a lot of people who are bipolar and they don't talk about it enough. And it's because they feel like they'd be ostracized. This was then. Now you can kind of talk about it more without people looking at you weird.
Yeah. And for me, it was just so much, I grew up in a family where mental health wasn't taken very seriously either. So it was just, I went through the trial and error thing and it was exhausting. It was just so much easier to just pick up a bottle and just drown in it,
Yeah.
Rather than wait, 6 weeks to see if a medication works, but be suffering the entire time because you don't know what to do. Therapy alone was not helping because I've been in therapy for years. That wasn't helping. It was just so much easier to just pick up a bottle. And
are you back in therapy now? Going to go back into therapy?
Yeah, well, I have been since February. I got back into therapy, but I was still drinking pretty heavily. It just wasn't doing much to help. But a lot of therapy as well is being honest with yourself, and actually trying to figure out the problems. Whereas I wasn't necessarily doing that, and now I'm starting to realize that as well. Where you have to be honest with yourself and actually try to work through the problems, not just talk about them.
Yeah.
And expect you to be better just because you're talking about them.
What's the cliche? The only way out is through.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I'm still getting used to. The only way out is through. The only way out is through. Geez, I can't speak English. But yeah, it's been a lot of eye-opening moments, like I've been saying throughout this entire, I would say, last 30 to 60 days. But like I said, we got on a medication that helps so far. Vivitrol is working great. The last couple of therapy sessions I have, we've actually, started actually working through some of the trauma that has affected me, that has kind of led me down this path as well. And then also just, being honest with myself, like, I used to beat myself up a lot, but in reality, I had a problem. I wasn't dealing with it very well. And now, I made mistakes, and now's the time to fix them, basically.
Yep, and it's going to take time to fix all those mistakes and get back those relationships, but it's going to be worth it in the long haul. It is going to be worth it once you do. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees, but they're there. It's worth it. So
yeah, and honestly, one of the biggest motivators too is the fact that, at the beginning of this year, up until about 60 days ago, when I really, started trying, like towards the tail end of, like, before everything happened, I was starting to learn how to eat better, try to drink more water, don't wake up drunk, wait a little bit before you start drinking, stuff like that. And I was seeing some minor improvements, but when I stopped completely, after I got out of the hospital and actually got on a diet and started, doing all these things to take care of myself, I was 210 pounds at the beginning of September, and I'm down to 175 now. So I use that as kind of the progress. Does that make sense? Something visible to me that I can say, well, I'm actually, I'm starting to make progress. Does that make sense?
it makes complete sense.
Because for me, a lot of it was like, I was very impatient. Like, when am I going to start feeling better? What am I actually, I'm not seeing any improvements, so those times that I do get cravings, I'm like, look how much healthier you are. I'm actually building muscle now. I'm enjoying going outside, listening to music again. I feel better, feel happier, and realizing that I was only making myself miserable. I was only making the problem worse at the end of the day.
I'm glad you're able to, like, see that and take advantage of that, because when you can take advantage of knowing that is when you can really start doing things more actively for yourself. Like you said, taking care of better your way you're eating, your healthier habits, you losing the weight. These are all things that are like gifts that you've been given because you've been sticking to this plan for the last, 3 or 4 weeks.
Right. So, granted, a lot of that weight loss was being in the hospital, but after that just jump started it. But after that, I've been losing a lot of weight. I don't know if it's water weight but it gives me something that I can physically see.
Something tangible.
Right, something tangible that I step on the scale and I'm like, wow, I'm actually a little bit healthier. Right now, I think I'm still struggling with stuff like blood pressure and stuff like that, but overall, I can physically both see and feel a lot better. So that's a huge motivator as well for me to try to stick.
Well, I look forward to, seeing you post more and seeing your post from the different angle of it, as opposed to the one that's suffering to the one that can help the ones that are suffering now with your story. And, I'm glad you're able to. We tried doing this a few weeks ago, but I think it's been night and day of how you were feeling then to how you were feeling now. I'm glad we waited the extra couple weeks to sit down and talk, because you look like you're doing a lot better now than you were a few weeks ago.
Right. Yeah. I was in a pretty tough spot. I would say that I think, around the time that the first time we tried to do this, I think I was saying this just today because I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and I was like, I think that was the most miserable I think I've ever been, throughout my entire life at that point. So I'm surprised I even showed up, to be honest.
You did your best not. I mean, you still you tried your best, but it wasn't going to work at the end of the day. You weren't ready to sit down and be so open and honest.
Right.
And that's fine. Now you are ready, and now you're killing it, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So thanks again for sitting down with me again this time talking, and congrats on 30 days. And there's going to be more. I promise. It gets even better. Wait till you hit 90 days. Wait till you hit 9 months. You think you're feeling great now. In 9 months, you're going to be really feeling great.
Yeah, and I just shared a study in the group. And by the way, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. But I just shared a study in the group that they did a study of people with AUD and studied their brain scans and found that most people can get pretty much all of their cognitive function back in around 7 months of sobriety. So that's another thing that I can look forward to. And at this point, it's about looking at the future. I'm not going to keep dwelling on the past and trying to numb up and basically try to ignore it. I'm just going to keep pushing and keep moving forward and try to focus on what I can do better in the future, to be honest. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll talk to you soon, but thanks again for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
All right, see you later, bud.